Hello, Joanna.
Hi,
Thank you so much for receiving us here in paradise.
you are welcome.
So, who is Joana Saahirah?
I don't like labels, so I try to avoid defining myself because, in a way, that's limiting who I am becoming every day. But publicly, I'm known as a dancer, as a teacher, a choreographer, and an author. So that could be a possible definition. I am specialized in Egyptian, Oriental, and Folkloric dances, and all my work tends to go around it. But I've been educated in acting and classical ballet. I've studied many other things, and I like to be open to whatever comes my way. So it doesn't mean that who I am right now is whom I will be tomorrow. So Joanna is somebody who likes to create, who likes to learn in whatever she's doing, and who just likes to grow basically in anything that she's doing.
Right. You define Egyptian Oriental dance.
Well, I try to be brief, yes, in a subject that is very wide and complex. For me, the way I rescued Oriental dance, Egyptian Oriental dance in Egypt, I can define it as a language, the language of the soul, a language that is religious in the true sense of the word religion, an art form and a way of communicating that reunites the several parts of ourselves, of our human nature, let that be the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, also a bridge between the dancer and the world around the dancer. So it's not only a question of reconnecting you with yourself and the several parts that compose you as a human being, but also reconnecting people. Me with my students, me with my audience, and so forth. So it is a unity language. It is a part of Egyptian culture for sure, but it's also a universal tool for unity and a revolutionary art form that brings a lot of concepts which are not new, but they have been forgotten. So in some way it brings a new message in many aspects because people have forgotten about it. There is like a tendency nowadays to become mechanical, an extension of a machine. It's something that you see in the East and in the West. The West is worse, of course, because we've been through industrial revolution and we have much more technology and productivity-oriented mentality.
Yeah.
So there are some differences between the East and the West in that sense, but I think that it's a world tendency for us to become machines. And what Oriental dance brings is a message of humanity and going back to our human mode, which is also our divine mode. Yeah.
What's the message that Oriental dance brings to the world?
So I guess that will depend on the person who practices the dance, because everybody will see it differently. The dance itself and the message that it brings is defined by the messenger at a great extent, because it depends how much you see in it, how much of you see in it, because you will not find things in Egyptian dance which are not already inside of yourself. It is a reflection of who you are, and I say this very often. Egyptian dance is an X-ray. It reflects who you are. So if you carry those treasures inside of you, you will recognize them in the dance. If you don't, it will just be a set of movements, an exotic set of movements which mean nothing. So for me, the way I felt it and the way I rediscovered it in Egypt and the way I've been working on it all this time, the message is basically a message of unity, as I already mentioned. So there is this proposal of coming together and coming inside also. A language that comes from the inside and not an external language. So in order to dance, you have to dance inside first. So there's this aspect of dance too, which then again, it's not new. But we have forgotten how to how to act and to move and to speak from inside. And this is what Egyptian dance brings. First you listen, then you feel, then you eventually move externally, but that's just a consequence of an internal movement. And that is something very useful, I think, very rare nowadays, because we're pushed outside and into a certain superficiality and speed that is not conducive to good dance, and I think is not conducive to good life as well. So the message of Egyptian dance, aside from the unity, is freedom. For me, this is how I see it. It's a dance that gives you tools, technical tools and mentality tools and re-education tools, so that you can be more free while you're moving in artistic terms, but also more free on a personal level. Because, you know, my body is conditioned by my mind. If I have a mind cluttered by monkeys and prejudices and fears, my body will reflect that, so the movement will reflect what's in my head. The same thing with the heart. If you have a heart which is closed, I don't believe you can be a great Oriental dancer, because the dance requires that all the channel is completely open and pure, so things can circulate and you can bring those things through your dance. If you have a cluttered or closed heart, that will influence your technique, the way you move. So everything is connected, and it is really about freedom. The free to be more of yourself, the free to move, to feel, to share whatever you are feeling in this exact moment. No editing, no masks. So it's an art form of vulnerability also. No masks. You should be able and brave enough and strong enough to share your fragilities, your darker sides, as much as you share your light and your pretty, your cute sides. So there is no label, there is no limits in terms of how much you can express in this dance. And that is freedom. I see it as freedom. So I would pinpoint these two aspects, the unity and the freedom, because I think they're really at the core of the dance.
In that sense, what do you think are the benefits of Oriental dance that they can bring actually to the ones who practice it?
I believe it depends on the teacher that you have, because then again the dance can be taught and performed and understood on very different levels. You have the Oriental dance, which is taught in the gyms and dance schools, where dance is more like a sport and not so much as an art form. So you have people who do it just to lose weight, you know, or to gain some flexibility, or just to have fun. And that's perfect. I have no problem with that. But there are other levels. So when you grab the dance as an art form, and when you teach it as an art form, and also as a self-discovery tool, then the benefits change. You're not there just to be in shape or to be stronger or to have a body which moves efficiently, which is already cool. But you're there to discover who you are. You're there to discover your sensibility, starting with your sensibility in listening. How you listen, how you react to each music. How does your body react to what you listen? What kind of emotions and stories are you able to bring out when you listen and allow yourself to feel? So there's a lot of personal discovery going on there. Also, the question of self-image, because in Oriental dance, all the movements are so organic and so natural that they feel and look beautiful in everybody. I've seen, you know, male and female dancers from all shapes, all kinds of bodies moving, and I've never seen an ugly body. I've never seen it. A lot of people take time to see the beauty in their bodies, but I, as a teacher from the outside, don't take time. I see the beauty immediately. Very diverse, right? Because you may have a very tall person, a short, it's totally indifferent. And that's really beautiful when you see the beauty of the individual coming forth. which is completely free from the aesthetic rules that we have, aesthetic ideas that we have of the beautiful and the ugly. It's something that transcends. When you're moving from that place of organic movement and emotion, everybody is beautiful. So there is progression in the way you see yourself, the way you know yourself, the way you value your own body as a creative tool, and not just as a machine that accomplishes certain tasks that you force it to accomplish. So suddenly you start to think, what will I do with this hand? What will I do with these shoulders? You know, what do my legs allow me to do? How this arm can tell me things,
building
you know?
conscience to yourself, right?
Yes, and it is an awareness and a self-love, self-appreciation process, which I think is very beautiful and very useful, because it's great to have good technique and to know the rhythms and the culture, and there's a lot of interesting things when you're learning Oriental dance, because it comes from Egypt, so you gotta know about mentality, religion, politics, social life in Egypt. Each dance style belongs where, who practices it, what is the cultural context of each style. So there's a lot of very interesting, fascinating information around the dance. But what I think is more useful, it's really the personal work, because if you have all the data and all the technique, but you remain an immature human being who hates himself or herself and does not develop the ability to work inside of yourself and to appreciate who you are, then there is a big problem there. I mean, for what all the information? I mean, it's interesting, but for what? If then you're moving like an automat, there is no personal power coming to the table. So for me, the biggest benefit of somebody who is properly taught Egyptian dance from a deep level, it's the personal transformation that comes with it and the expansion that can come on a human level.
Right. So how do you discover Oriental dance?
It is a very interesting story, because I never had any special interest in Egypt or Egyptian dance or Egyptian culture. I've studied classical ballet from a very early age, from 5 years old. So my body and my mind in many ways had been educated in a Western classical ballet kind of discipline, which is, you know, all about going against nature. You're trying to tame gravity. You're going against gravity. You're suffering, physically suffering, in order to get things properly done. So when I discovered Egyptian dance totally by chance, it was in a festival in the north of Portugal, an ethnic festival. I was not searching for it. I just, you know, I crossed paths with a workshop of Oriental dance of a teacher called Priska Diedrich, beautiful teacher, very talented, and I knew immediately that I knew that music and that dance. I had no idea where it came from, I had no idea who made it, I had no data, but once I heard the music and once I started to move, it was like remembering, you know, like I'm remembering everything suddenly. So it was a very surprising, very magical process, and from the point that I started to remember, I didn't stop digging. From that place I went studying in Spain. I started to go to Egypt to study music and dance. So everything happened very fast from that point on. But it was really this meeting between present and past, when you realize that you already know that. You just had to meet somebody that you know made the click, so that door was open once more. And I found, or I felt that was my language, my natural language. There was no foreign element to it. That was interesting, because most dancers come to the dance due to the foreign element. They think it's exotic. I found it the least exotic thing in the world. I thought it was very familiar. There was nothing exotic about it, and I still think There is nothing exotic about it. It's very natural, it's very human, and it's something that I already carried inside.
So why did you decided to start your career in Egypt?
Well, I had in fact started working in this area in Portugal, but only less than 2 years. It was very short time, and I had already traveled to Egypt to study several times, and I had this clear notion that I needed to go there. First of all, to know my craft in depth. I didn't want to receive second-hand information. I wanted to see with my own eyes and to learn from the territory where the dance is coming from. I also felt that in order to share this love of this dance with the world, I had to go from a place of credibility. A place of credibility had to do not only with rescuing the dance from its original birthplace, but proving that I could be a successful dancer in Egypt. Something that is incredibly hard on many levels. So I went by myself with no manager, no contacts, nothing, and I went literally knocking on managers' doors and tell them, you know, the crazy thing. I'm here, I have a show prepared, which I didn't at the time when I knocked at those doors, and I'm ready to audition and I'm ready to prove that this is my thing. And this is how I launched myself in Egypt. It was a leap of faith and a very hard test, not only to my dancing talent, but I think most of all to my character. Because once I arrived to Egypt, I discovered it was forbidden for foreigners to dance professionally. And I had the chance to go back. And I never did. So I decided that despite the law that forbade me to do my work, which meant I didn't have any means of survival even because I lived from dance, I still believed that was my destiny. I knew I had to be there and I was going to manage somehow, some way. And this is how I did it. Also, I wanted to write a book about Egyptian dance, and once more, I didn't want to write about theory coming from the mouth of somebody else. I wanted to write things that were meaningful, things that I had experienced firsthand. So that was also one of the reasons that made me go to Egypt and made me settle the goal of starting, of taking off from there. That was the idea.
So what made you decide to take Oriental dance to the world?
Well, after 8 years performing in Egypt, and the years before that studying, I also knew, and I know this sounds very strange, I mean, how can you know, but I knew that there was a certain point when that Egyptian chapter had to be closed, and I had to share all the things I had rescued with other people. I knew that my job did not finish in Egypt. I knew that I had been there for a reason, and all the things that I've been gathering, working every day with my orchestra, learning from audiences, learning from daily life, learning from strangers, you know, because in Egypt you don't only learn about the dance itself, you learn about the context around it, and that gives you a depth of understanding of your craft if you're able to relate things which are apparently unrelated. So this is what I did. I gathered so much information, not only about my art, but about the religion, about the culture, about the mentality, and how everything comes together. And it comes a point when you stop learning, your cup is completely full, it's already outpouring, and you say, okay, it's the time to close this chapter and to open a new chapter. Everything that I gathered in this cup, I'm gonna take to the whole world, because this is my life, this is my destiny, this is what I was born to do. So that's what I've been doing in the last 4 years.
All right. So what really captivates you in this dance?
There is a part of the fascination which I think it's impossible to put into words. I mean, why do you love something? Why do you fall in love with something? It is at a great extent impossible to define. I mean, there is a hook, yeah, to a subject that you cannot explain. It's a mystery. I mean, for me, from what is conscious in me, right, from what I can be aware of, I think it has to do with the aspect of the freedom. It is something that allows me to keep growing without limits. It's also a dance form that grows as I grow. So the way I'm dancing today is not the way I'm gonna dance tomorrow. And it's not definitely the way I danced, 1 year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So there is like an evolution of the dance that goes with me. It follows me. So it's always something new because I'm always something new. So as I'm changing and as I'm growing, I see the depth and the dimension of the dancing growing with me. So there is always novelties, new steps, new movements, new depths of interpretation, things like silences, things like the ability to work with my energy when I'm dancing for people, for instance. Things that only a mature dancer can understand and can put into practice. Those things come with time, you see. So every day I discover something new. Every time that I dance, I find some challenges and I find some surprises. It's also a dance that helps me to remind myself of how precious life is. So it's a reminder. It's not only a creative tool that I can use and be surprised with. It's not only something that gives me an immense pleasure, but it's also an art form that reminds me how precious everything is, a moment of sadness, a moment of noise, a moment of silence. You work with everything. It teaches you to accept and to be open and to be creative and to be flexible with everything. So it's a tool of knowledge and personal growth that really keeps me hooked because there is always more. There is always more. You are always kind of a beginner, and although that may be scary for a lot of people, that's not scary to me. I love to gather information, to gather knowledge and throw it away every day. I throw it away and I start from zero. I come from ground zero, like I know nothing, and I always discover something new. You're like a student. This dance allows you to be the eternal student, and for me this is very, very interesting, very challenging. It pushes me forward and up, and I just love that.
So what do you feel when you're dancing for other people?
The connection, the human connection, the adrenaline of being on a stage, which is something I love and feel very comfortable with. The need to be more human and more open, also because the stage is a safe place for me. I'm often shy and afraid in normal life, but not on stage. Because on stage, everything is... it's a safe place to be completely me, and I know people understand me for who I am, exactly who I am. There is no misunderstanding on stage. My soul, my heart are more visible than anywhere else. And that kind of quality, the experience, the human experience that I create with the people, right? Because the performance is made at least of two sides. It's the dynamic between me and the audience. And if I have musicians, which was the case in Egypt, and it's the case sometimes when I travel, very often we have orchestras, not my orchestra, but other orchestras. So when you do have orchestras, it's even more interesting because then you have the orchestra in your back, you're here in the middle, and you have the audience. So the dancer is kind of an intermediary. It's a bridge between these two elements, and the dancer is responsible for creating this human experience that brings everybody together. And for me, it is a great privilege to have a space where people are there to watch me. Yeah, I mean, it is a privilege. I'm doing what I love, and people are paying to watch me. They come from their homes and they stay there with me, with their hearts in their hands, watching me. That is a real privilege, you know. And the question of being seen for who you are, I think this is a very personal matter to me, because I'm often misunderstood and people make all sorts of images about me. So when I'm dancing on stage, there is no misunderstanding. Who I am comes forth clearly. So you feel seen and you feel appreciated for who you are, and you feel that people really see you. I think the word is to see you, really see you. And because I dance from my heart, it becomes also a spiritual experience, in the sense that when you move from your heart, when you move from an inside place of truth and authenticity and openness, you allow other people to do the same, at least during the length of the performance. And that's very beautiful to witness. It's not something that I just see, something that I feel, because as a performer you work as a mirror. If I'm open, if I'm delivering my heart on a platter, what happens is that people automatically deliver their hearts on a platter to me. It is a mirror thing. And it's very beautiful that at least during the length of a performance, there are no masks, there are no fears, there is no protocol. There is just human beings sharing stories and feeling connected through one single soul. And using a dance which is, considered very exotic, you see, but there is nothing exotic about it. It's really a universal language. Otherwise, you would not have it everywhere nowadays in the world. And it's something that, a performance for an Egyptian audience is very specific, and it's still my favorite. But when I dance in anywhere, any other country, there are beautiful results as well. It's different because people don't know the music that well, they don't know the dance that well. But if you're dancing from a place of knowledge and heart and integrity, people can feel you independently of the country where you're performing. So there is like a transversal effect that you have on people. I've tested that, and I've challenged myself to do that permanently. From the moment that I moved out of Egypt and I started to dance in very different countries, and I wondered, will this work? Yeah. Will I be able to reproduce the magic that I was very, very comfortable with in Egypt, right? Because for Egyptians, I know exactly how the formula goes. I know how to hit them exactly where I should hit them. And I know they understand me immediately, and they know that I know, because it's a language that's part of their culture. But what about Chinese? What about Japanese? What about when you're dancing in England, or when you're dancing in France, or when you're dancing in Australia, or, my question initially was, will they feel me as well? I mean, will it be so easy to connect as it is with Egyptians? Because Egyptian audiences are my comfort zone, but foreigners are not, which is curious, because I'm a foreigner, right? So, but foreigners, dancing for foreigners is very hard for me. And it is still a question mark every time I go on stage in a foreign country. Will they understand me? Will this work?
In that sense, how could you define a great Oriental dance performance?
I could say a lot about it, but I would probably resume it as a human experience that touches people directly in the heart and moves them and makes them feel something and makes them question what is dance, what is Oriental dance. Because most people, they know it as ballet dance, okay, which is, by the way, the incorrect term. The Oriental dance, raqs sharqi, is the correct term for this dance. So most audiences, they don't expect much anyway, right? So a great performance goes beyond what regular audiences expect from an Oriental dancer, and for me there is nothing great that goes less than touching people and moving them and awakening them up, you know, to realities they didn't know existed. Giving them goosebumps, you know, making them awaken in such a way they feel dizzy and disoriented and they don't know what hit them. They don't know what is that. They cannot define, see, why am I moved? What is that? There is this sense of surprise, I think, that I've seen in people's faces, and I often receive comments of people from the audience telling me, but what you're doing, it's not belly dance, that's something else. I say, well, I don't recognize the term belly dance, point one, so yes, I'm not doing belly dance because that's not what I do, that's not the name I use, at least, but it's not that I'm not doing Oriental dance, I'm just doing it properly. And most times you don't see it properly done. So it's not really my merit, let's say. It's the merit of the dance which I happen to know about. And I try to be as faithful as possible to it. So people get surprised because they don't expect that. They don't expect to be moved to tears, for instance. That's very surprising. How? How do you go to an Oriental dance performance and you're moved to tears? Well, that's very strange for, at least for foreign audiences, you know, it's a surprise. So a great Oriental dance performance, I think, has a lot to do with how much you can connect and affect your audience beyond the visual. It's really not about showing them the nice movements you have. Nobody cares. Nobody is there to see how many movements you have. This is not a gymnastic demonstration, it's a dance. Dance, which is an art form, has to communicate and touch and move people. This happens in painting, it happens in cinema, it happens in great writing, it happens in sculpture. Everything that is involved with art is supposed to move you in some way, in any personal way, to awaken you to something. So less than that is just a set of exotic gymnastics, and I'm not interested.
So what's the feedback you receive from people in your shows?
Well, part of it was what I mentioned now, the surprise, an element of surprise and not knowing that this could be done like that, right? Like, oh, I didn't imagine Oriental dance could be like that. This is one thing. Another thing really depends very much on the audience, because some audiences are more active in the way they show what they're feeling while they're performing, and some audiences are a little bit more shy.
Yeah.
I'm used to Egyptian audiences which have no distinction between their space and the stage. So in Egypt, people will tell you in your face, in many ways, verbally and otherwise, if what you're doing is great, average, or terrible. So this feedback, constant feedback, very loud feedback, is something that I'm used to, and I like it. It's not only that I'm used to. It can sound scary in the sense that you have a barometer of your work right there on your face. But if you're there to learn too, which I am, it's very good to have an audience which is a teacher, your guiding light as well. So I'm dancing and I see if what I'm doing is working or not from their reactions. In foreign audiences, what usually people do, it's, you know, of course they applaud, but that's not a guarantee of anything for me, because we know that we are educated to applaud in the end of a show, even if you don't really like it. Yes. So I'm not very, I don't give much importance to the applause, although it feels good, of course, you know, and it's protocol, but it is protocol. So I pay attention where the energy of the people is, if it is with me while I'm performing or if it's not, and it should always be with me. And usually people feel from what I hear from them, of course, because there's a lot of feedback that I never get to receive, you know, people comment between them, but I don't ask them, and not always they have the opportunity to speak with me, but usually this element of surprise, of I had no idea it could be like this, and of something which is very powerful, very alive and very unpredictable. And then again, that has to do with the fact that I worked with live music for a long time, and Egyptian musicians improvise by nature. So I was used to react to the music, which is constantly changing second by second. So there is an element of aliveness and spontaneity and unpredictable musicality in my performances that catch people off guard. And I think it's interesting in the way that you don't know what's coming next, because I don't know. That's the magical thing. It is a spontaneous thing. It is not something that I pre-programmed to impress them. No, it's just that when I perform, I improvise. I only choreograph when I have dancers with me, or I choreograph for other people, which means that as a solo performer, I'm improvising 100%. And because I'm trained with great musicians who are improvising all the time, my tendency is to create a performance which is alive and surprising. I create it second by second, and it depends on the space, depends on the mood, my mood, the mood of the people who are watching me, the mood of the musicians, if there are musicians. So there is this aspect of aliveness, of you, the audience, witnessing something which is really something irrepeatable. It will never happen again. And if you see it in a video, you will not have any idea of what was going on, because there's a lot of energy dance going on. So you have to be there to know exactly how magical it was. And this is something that I think characterizes my performances, is that I work with my physical body, but I work with emotion and with energy so much that people can feel me. It's not only that they can see me, they can feel me. So when they feel me, I take them with me and with the music, you know. All the stories that I relive through the music, I take the audience with me. So it's a journey for everybody. It's a human experience that it becomes unforgettable. And this is a word that I've heard many times, you know. People telling me, I will never forget this performance. It is unforgettable. To watch you dance live, it's unforgettable. And I think that's very nice. It's better than, you know, telling you about your nice dress. Or
We've been talking about Egypt. I'm kind of interested in knowing what's your vision of this ancient Egypt and the contemporary Egypt.
Well, again, all these subjects are very wide and it's hard to resume them, right? But there is the ancient Egypt, pharaonic Egypt, most of us have in mind, because that's how we're taught in school. We study Egypt in the pharaonic civilization times, but we don't study contemporary Egypt. And there is a lot of mix between what is Arab world, what is Egypt. Egypt is the north of Africa, by the way. It is part of the Arab world, and it is an Islamic country, so that's, let's say, unifying link with the Arab world. But Egypt has very specific characteristics, and some of the things from ancient Egypt survived time. Some. Not much, but some. Nowadays, what we have is mostly an Islamic country. An Islamic country with very specific characteristics, because Egypt, unlike other countries in the north of Africa and the Middle East, have absorbed Islam in a very peculiar way. It's like ancient Egyptian culture and all the occupations that Egypt went through are meshed into Islam. So it is a country where traditions are very important. You don't have the kind of relationship you had in ancient Egypt, let's say in relation to music and dance, for instance. This is a big change, because in ancient Egypt you had dancers as goddesses almost, you know, and dance and music as a way to connect with the divine. Nowadays, by contrast, dancers are seen as prostitutes, and dance is considered haram, which is forbidden by God. So there are radical differences in relation to music and dance, that is for sure. I mean, what we had, the respect and the value and the religious association we had in ancient Egypt does not exist anymore when we're talking about dance and music. It's really the opposite. We're going for complete opposites. And nowadays, when you go to Egypt, you will not catch a lot of the ancient Egypt. I mean, there are like glimpses here and there, some words, some medicine, natural medicine, some expressions, some superstitions, some influences in the music, in the food. I mean, you find like glimpses of it, but it's a totally different country. It is a country which has been occupied many times, you know, by the Fatimid, the Mameluke, the Turks were there. You had the French, you had the English, you had before the English and the French and the Turks, you had several other countries occupying Egypt. So it's like Egypt as a country, it is recent, you know. I mean, contemporary Egypt as a country, it's kind of recent in the sense that until the English left in the 50s, 1950s, Egypt had been occupied by somebody else, by another country. Yeah, so there was this golden period of ancient Egypt, but then when the colonizers started to come, and they were like one after another, Egypt kind of lost itself, it lost its identity, but part of it remains stable. It's like a very interesting mix between the origins of the country, what remains of the origins, and the several occupations and what each occupator left in the country, mixed with Islam also. So now we have, you know, Islamized country with a lot of contradictions too. You have people suffering from what I call collective amnesia in relation to dance, for instance, where part of them knows this is beautiful and it's part of their culture, but there is another part of them who tells them this is wrong. God forbids it. So there is an Egypt also before and after Islam. Yeah, it's a very complex history, and they are completely different worlds, ancient Egypt and contemporary. It's almost unrecognizable. If you go to Egypt expecting to find a pharaonic civilization, you're going to be depressed, because there is, you know, you have the monuments, you have Saqqara and the Giza pyramids, and you have all the line of Upper Egypt filled with beautiful temples, Hatshepsut, Luxor, Komombo, Edfu, you know, Abu Simbel, a lot of beautiful things, but they are touristic places. They are not places that are culturally alive in people's daily routines. They're not. It's something that belongs to the past, unfortunately.